Lena Ashford had always been the kind of person people looked past. She was not the loudest girl in the room. She did not wear the most expensive clothes or speak with the most confident voice. She was quiet, careful, and kind, the sort of person who noticed when someone was struggling and offered help before they even asked. Her pack never saw that as strength. They saw it as weakness. And in a world built on power and rank, weakness was the one thing nobody forgave. She had grown up in the Silverstone Pack, a large and proud community nestled between thick forests and gray mountains. The pack had rules, traditions, and a strict order of things. At the top sat the Alpha. Below him, the Betas and Warriors. And at the very bottom, the Omegas, quiet, gentle wolves who were useful but rarely respected. Lena was an Omega. She had accepted that fact the way one accepts the weather, not happily, but without argument. She worked hard, helped the pack healers, and kept her head down. She asked for nothing. She expected nothing. So when the night of the annual claiming ceremony arrived, she told herself not to hope. The claiming ceremony happened once a year, when the moon goddess revealed fated mates to those who were ready. It was the most important night in pack life. Young wolves gathered in the great hall, dressed in their finest, hearts racing with the possibility that tonight might be the night everything changed. Lena wore a simple white dress that belonged to Elder Mara. She stood near the back of the hall, watching others laugh and talk, telling herself she was only there because attendance was required. Then the pull happened. It was like nothing she had ever felt before. A warm, steady tug in the center of her chest, like someone had reached through the crowd and gently taken hold of her. Her wolf stirred, not with alarm but with recognition. Deep, certain recognition. Her feet moved before she told them to. The crowd parted as she walked. Some people turned to look, a few whispered. Lena barely heard any of it. She followed the pull across the marble floor, past the long tables and the glowing lanterns, until she stopped. She looked up. Standing before her was King Dorian Vale. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in dark formal clothing that made him look exactly like what he was, the most powerful alpha in the 5 territories. He had silver-gray eyes that were cold and sharp, like the edge of a blade left out in winter. He was handsome in the way that mountains were handsome, impressive, distant, and not particularly interested in being admired. He stared at her. The entire hall went quiet. Lena's heart was pounding. Her wolf was singing. Every part of her knew, with complete and quiet certainty, that this man was her fated mate. The moon goddess had chosen him for her, and her for him, in whatever mysterious way the universe arranged such things. For one long moment, she truly believed it was going to be all right. Then his expression changed. His jaw tightened. His eyes moved over her slowly. The borrowed dress, the soft hands of a healer, the uncertain posture of someone who had spent years making herself smaller. She watched the calculation happen behind his cold eyes. She watched him decide. He stepped back. His voice was quiet, but the hall was so silent that every single person heard every word. I, Dorian Vale, Alpha King of the 5 territories, reject you, Lena Ashford, as my fated mate. You are not suitable for my position or my bloodline. The words hit her like a wave of ice water. The bond, that beautiful, warm, glowing thing she had felt for all of 3 minutes, shattered. The pain was physical. It moved through her chest like something had broken inside, because something had. She gripped the edge of a nearby table to keep from falling. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The crowd simply watched. Lena stood there for several seconds, breathing through the pain. She looked at the floor. Then she looked up. She did not cry. She would not cry. Not here. Not for an audience. Not for him. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and looked at Dorian Vale one final time. His face was unreadable. He had already looked away, already moving on to speak to someone beside him, as though what had just happened was a minor inconvenience quickly handled. Lena turned and walked out of the hall. She did not run. She walked, slowly and steadily, out of the great doors and into the cold night air, and only when the doors closed behind her, and the sounds of the hall were muffled and far away, did she lean against the stone wall and allow herself to shake. Elder Mara found her there 20 minutes later. Mara was an old woman with silver hair and kind eyes who had served the pack as a healer for 40 years. She was the only person who knew the truth about Lena's bloodline, that Lena was a distant descendant of the first she-wolf, one of the ancient founding wolves of their kind. The bloodline had been quiet in Lena for years, buried under ordinary life, but Mara had always believed that pain could unlock it. She crouched beside Lena and pressed a warm hand to the girl's face. "Listen to me," Mara said quietly. "You need to leave tonight." Lena looked at her with exhausted eyes. "Leave?" "Not because of shame," Mara said firmly, "because of what just woke up inside you. The rejection broke something open in your blood, child. If the wrong people notice it, you will not be safe here." Lena did not fully understand, but she trusted Mara more than she trusted anyone else in the world. That same night, she climbed into Mara's old truck with nothing but a small bag of clothes, a handful of coins, and the quiet, hollow ache in her chest where the bond had been. She did not look back. 3 weeks later, staying in a small room above a bakery in a neutral territory town called Fernwall, Lena discovered she was going to have a baby. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time after she found out. Then she pressed her hand gently to her stomach, took one slow breath, and said, very quietly, to no one in particular, "All right, we will figure this out." And she did. Fernwall was a peaceful town, where wolves and humans lived side by side, without pack politics or rankings. Nobody asked questions. Nobody cared about bloodlines. It was exactly the kind of place where a person could start over. Lena became a herbalist. She learned to grow and dry plants, mix remedies, and brew teas that helped people sleep, or eased pain, or settled troubled stomachs. She built a small, steady business. Mara eventually joined her, moving into a cottage just behind Lena's. Together, they were a small, quiet family of 2, until the boys arrived. Ethan and Eli came into the world on a stormy night in early spring, both of them loud and healthy, and absolutely certain that they were already in charge of everything. They grew fast. They were bright and fierce and full of questions. They climbed every tree in the yard. They argued constantly but stood side by side the moment anyone else gave either of them trouble. They were, in every way, the best thing Lena had ever done. By the time they were 5, she had a problem. Other wolves in Fernwall had started to notice something about the boys. Not anything obvious, nothing they could put into words easily, but adult wolves would find themselves stepping aside without meaning to when the twins walked past. Children would quiet down mid-game and look up whenever Ethan or Eli entered the yard. Even older, experienced shifters would feel a strange pressure in the air around the boys, and not quite know why. Mara knew why. "They are alpha-born," she told Lena one evening, while they sat on the porch watching the boys chase fireflies in the yard. "Both of them. Alpha energy in twins is almost unheard of. People are going to start asking questions we cannot answer safely." Lena watched her sons laugh and run in the warm evening light. "I know," she said quietly. "I have known for a while." She said nothing else. There was nothing to say. She had built the best life she could with what she had, and she would keep building it for as long as she was allowed to. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late summer when a man walked into her shop for the first time. He was large and serious-looking, wearing plain traveling clothes that did not quite hide the fact that he was clearly someone of importance. He moved through the shop carefully, like a man used to watching his surroundings. He picked up a few jars of dried herbs, read the labels, set them down. Then Ethan came through the back door. The man looked up. He went completely still. Ethan, unbothered and confident in the way only small children can be, looked at the stranger with his silver-gray eyes and asked, "Are you going to buy something, or are you just looking?" Lena stepped in from the back room immediately. She placed herself between her son and the stranger, with a calm that she did not feel. "Can I help you?" she said. The man looked at her. Something moved behind his eyes. Recognition. Guilt. Something heavy. He paid for his herbs without another word and left. But he came back the next morning. He sat outside her shop on a wooden bench with a cup of tea from the stall next door, as though he happened to be in the neighborhood. Lena watched him through the window for a while. Then she went outside and sat beside him. "You work for him," she said. It was not a question. The man, his name was Cain, She would learn later. Looked straight ahead. I was at the ceremony, he said. 5 years ago. I saw what happened. I said nothing. He paused. I have regretted that for 5 years. Lena said nothing. She folded her hands in her lap and waited. He is not the same, Kane said carefully. I am not saying that to make excuses for him. I am saying it because it is true. He has not been the same since that night. That is not my concern, Lena said evenly. No, Kane agreed. It is not. But those boys are his sons. And there are people in the 5 territories who would use that against all 3 of them if they found out before he had a chance to protect them. Lena stood up and went back inside. She did not sleep that night. Dorian Vale arrived 4 days later. He came at dusk, without ceremony or guards, just one vehicle on the dirt road leading to her cottage, and then the sound of a car door, and then footsteps on her porch. Lena opened the door before he could knock. She had prepared herself. She had stood in her kitchen for 10 minutes before she opened that door, breathing steadily, reminding herself who she was. Not the girl in the borrowed dress, not the Omega at the back of the hall. 5 years had passed. She had built something real. She owed him nothing. Not forgiveness, not kindness, not a single easy moment. He looked older, not in a bad way, but in the way that certain kinds of weight show on a person over time. There were lines at the corners of his eyes that had not been there before. He was still the most commanding presence she had ever been near, but something in the way he stood was different. The absolute coldness was gone. In its place was something she had never expected to see on Dorian Vale's face. Uncertainty. She gripped the doorframe. You should not be here. I know, he said. His voice was quieter than she remembered. Lena, Whatever he planned to say next was interrupted by a crash from the hallway, followed by 2 pairs of running feet, and then Ethan and Eli both appeared behind her, breathless and grinning over whatever game they had just destroyed. They stopped when they saw the man at the door. Ethan tilted his head. Who are you? The silence that followed was the longest of Lena's life. Dorian looked at his sons. These 2 small, bright-eyed, impossibly strong little people, and the expression on his face was something she had no word for. It was not guilt exactly, though guilt was in it. It was not joy, though that was in it too. It was the look of a man seeing something he had no idea he had lost until he was standing directly in front of it. Lena let him in. She made tea because she needed something to do with her hands. The boys sat at the kitchen table and watched the tall stranger with open curiosity. Eli, the more patient of the 2, waited a reasonable amount of time, approximately 90 seconds, before asking, Are you our father? Dorian looked at Lena. She gave him nothing. He turned back to Eli and said, Yes. Eli considered this. Did you make our mom sad before we were born? A pause. Yes, I did. Are you going to fix it? Dorian was quiet for a moment. Then he looked across the kitchen at Lena, and his voice was steady, but soft when he answered. I am going to spend the rest of my life trying. Lena looked out the window at the dark garden. Her chest was tight. The bond that had broken 5 years ago was still there. It had never left, had never healed. It had simply gone quiet. Being this close to him was like turning up the sound on something she had kept turned down for years. She turned back and looked at him across the table. You do not get forgiveness tonight, she said clearly. You do not get to walk back in and have everything be easy. That is not how this works. I understand, he said. The boys come first. Every decision, every conversation, every next step, they come first. Their safety and happiness are more important than anything else. Yes, he said. I agree completely. She held his gaze for a long moment, looking for the cold calculation she remembered, the distance, the quiet cruelty of someone who treated another person as an inconvenience to be dismissed. She did not find it. She found a man who was tired and sorry and sitting very still at her kitchen table, because he understood that the next move was hers and hers alone. She took a slow breath. We will try, she said finally. Not for you, not for me, for them. Dorian nodded once. He did not smile, did not push, did not fill the moment with words it did not need. Ethan reached across the table and poked the king of the 5 territories in the arm. Can you teach us to fight? He asked. For the first time in 5 years, Dorian Vale smiled. It was small, and a little rusty, but it was real. Yes, he said, I can definitely teach you to fight. 1 year later, on a clear evening with the moon high and full above the trees, Lena stood in the forest at the edge of the king's territory, with wildflowers in her hair, and Elder Mara watching from a wooden chair someone had carried out especially for her. The boys stood very straight in little formal jackets, their silver-gray eyes bright with importance. When the ceremony was finished and the bond between Lena and Dorian settled into something whole and steady and complete, not the sharp, wild thing it had been at the beginning, but something stronger, built on time and honesty and hard-won trust, Lena exhaled slowly. Ethan leaned close to his brother. I told you he was fixing it, he whispered. Eli gave the matter the serious consideration it deserved. He was very slow about it, he whispered back. Lena heard them. She pressed her lips together to keep from laughing. Behind her, Dorian's hand found hers, and he held it carefully, like something he intended to keep.